Welcome to the Scarlet Tavern. Grab a drink, take a seat, and let's begin. Today we're diving deep into the surreal episode you probably never learned about in school, the Hanafi Siege of Washington, D.C. Buckle up as we unravel this intense 39-hour standoff that once shook this nation's capital to its core. This is Scarlet Tavern. Alright, we are back.
Welcome back. We're back.
Alright, so, before we get into this, I know we have actually had some new listeners, some new areas of the world we have explored. Ben, we have made it to Newfoundland.
Oh boy,
cool.
the Newfies. Welcome, Newfies.
We are in Newfoundland officially, and awesome. Then just a little bit outside of that, kind of in between Newfoundland and Canada. So we've reached a few places there.
Nice. Welcome, everybody.
I believe we're moving into Denmark as well.
Ooh.
So I know we have Germany. We have. I think we have one or two in Japan, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, we'll definitely have to, in honor of our new Japanese listeners, we're going to have to find something to talk about from Japan. I know that there's
I know what we will talk about. We will go ahead and talk about the Suicide Forest.
Yeah.
That's a huge one in Japan. Actually, I can give you guys an exact here. Let me see. So, yeah, we are in the bottom part of Hell on Earth, Australia.
Is that an actual town, or is you just...
No, Australia is not a real country.
It's a survival zone.
It's literally Hell on Earth. But no, we are in Sydney and Melbourne, from what I can look at. We have reached... Looks like we are just outside of Singapore. We are in multiple places in India. We are in a few places in the Middle East. Including... Let's see, that looks like we're in Turkey. We are going to be moving into... Looks like we're starting to move into, like... Kuwait area, actually.
Oh, I bet I did
maybe some of our people out there.
Yeah. Hey. Sorry. Yeah. Actually, I got a sergeant. I got somebody I know out there too.
We are in Kenya. We are just outside of South Sudan.
Oh.
Just outside of Angola. Actually, we're on the border of Mozambique.
So we've really gone global.
Yeah, I mean we haven't hit Italy yet. We're in Greece.
We'll get there. Yeah. We'll get there. We'll get to Italy.
We are in the UK. I mean,
yeah.
They're all losers there, anyways. But
ouch! Please don't direct the hate mail to me, please.
1776. 1776.
Yeah.
Do you just. Please tell us, do you guys cry on 4th of July?
I think they just drink... I think they just drink an amount of tea to make up for those I got into Boston Harbor.
I have a friend that lives in England, and I text him every 4th of July and ask him if he's doing okay. But yeah, we're in Deutschland. We're in... Actually, we did hit... Oslo.
Oh, Norway. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we are in Norway. And then, of course, we're all over the U.S. We are actually... I'm sorry. We are not in Newfoundland. I apologize. We're in New Brunswick.
New Brunswick. Oh.
Close enough.
Yeah. Don't worry, Newfoundland. We'll get to you soon.
They're all the same. We are in Alaska as well. So, pretty cool. We've hit people in Washington and Oregon. So
Oh,
we
today's at Washington State or DC?
Washington State. Do we have any DC? Let's see. Just outside. That's more Virginia, Leesburg, and
Yeah.
uh,
Well, for
in between Fredericksburg and Washington D.C.
yeah. Well, we're gonna be talking a lot about Washington D.C. today, and
Yeah.
probably one of the really one of the not necessarily the first terrorist attack in American history, but this is certainly one of the meets the technical definition of the first Islamic terrorist in America. And this is long before 9/11, the first World Trade Center, or any other terrorist attacks against the United States. This happened, and this is the Hanafi. Hanafi? How did you pronounce it, Caleb?
The
I could never.
Hanafi.
Hanafi. I've read the whole thing and everything. I was
Hanafi.
like, Hanafi. I can't pronounce it. I couldn't, even when I was reading all the research and doing everything, I couldn't pronounce it. I was like, that thing.
And,
But
and the reason I brought up the new followers is because since we do have some new people listening, I just want to do a few quick introductions so that people understand a little bit of our background and where we come from. My name is Caleb. I am well, for those that don't know, Scarlet Tavern started out of our Dungeons and Dragon uh, live stream that we do called Dungeons and Magi. We have a production company called Damn Media, and we decided to do a true crime podcast because we're true crime fans. So we decided to start Scarlet Tavern, which pulls from a little bit from our campaign. If you are interested, you can go look at all of that stuff. You can find us on our website. But I am the CEO of Damn Media. I was born and raised in Florida. Currently live in Kentucky, but I joined the military at 18. Joined the Air Force. Did military police. I guarded nuclear weapons. Got a top secret security clearance. Then I left the military, went into civilian law enforcement, and my last 2 years in law enforcement was federal, doing fugitive extradition alongside the marshals. So we all have a little bit different law enforcement experience, so we will be playing off of each other in those different experiences. Aaron, would you like to go next?
My name is Aaron. I am, I guess, the what
Director of merchandising.
director of merchandising. I'm not good with titles, man.
He's also my
Director of
dad.
merchandising for Dungeons and Magi. I'm also owner of Raven's Nest Dice, which supplies our players and others around the world, including Australia. I've sent some to Australia, several sets, as a matter of fact.
Very expensively.
So, yeah. But always
I
happy to
mean,
have them.
mailing stuff into penal colonies is very expensive.
Yeah, you're not kidding. I have an extensive background in law enforcement, 20 years, plus medical and first responder and things of that nature. A lot of tactical schools and training and being an instructor in different things. So I kind of bring that to the table, you know. But yeah, that's me.
All right, Ben. Dunkin'
I am
Donuts is
Ben.
better than Tim Hortons.
Yeah, this is the night where I.
Oh, perfect. We can't hear you.
God, I hate this mic. Just wants to work. Hi, I'm Ben. First off, Tim Hortons is better than Dunks. I am the COO of Damn Media. I am the second, you would say, the second in command of everything. I have about 7 years of military law enforcement behind my belt, and about just a little bit under in civilian security, working various types of security after my stint in the military. I am from New York, Buffalo, New York, where I currently live. Hopefully, very soon, I will be moving to Kentucky, and I will be saying goodbye to New York forever. Thank God. But I am also a true crime aficionado, and Caleb and Aaron will tell you I have a very funny way of finding these very lesser known incidents in American and world criminal history and just world history in general. And that is me in a nutshell.
Yeah, so that's us. It's kind of what sets us apart from other true crime podcasts is we do give you our perspective on the law enforcement side of things, and we admit when law enforcement fucks up. We tell you why we think they fucked up and how we would do things differently, and the differences between law enforcement back then when some of this stuff happened to how it is now. Where Ben and I have more of the modern experience, and my dad has more of the old school law enforcement experience because he retired in 2008.
And let's face it, he was there when the police did.
When what?
He was there when the police force was created.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, man. I was the reason why the term copper was coined.
He's the reason the Pinkertons were formed.
Yes.
Screw you, Watsy. All right. So send the Pinkertons after me. I bet you they can't beat me. All right, so let's get into it, Ben.
Yeah, all right. The Hanafi siege of Washington. This is like I said, this is a very often overlooked or not well known incident in American history, in American criminal history, terrorism history, as a matter of fact, because this does actually qualify as a actual terrorist incident. It's got kidnapping. Well, not hostage taking is a better word for it. Hostage taking. There's murder. There's all kinds of political and religious motivations. I guess to really get into it, we got to look at the beginning, where it all began. So the origins of this start with one man, Hamas Abdul Khalis, born Ernest Timothy McGee. This was an African-American individual. He was born in Gary, Indiana. He actually served during World War II, but he was Section 8 out of the Army before he even completed boot camp because he was described as crazy, schizophrenic. I believe the terms were used for him. He definitely was out there. No one ever... At first, the Army thought that he was just trying to get out of serving, but he kind of was a little off his rocker. Soon he was sent back home back to Indiana. While he was there, he met his wife, and they had actually not long converted to Islam, and soon became pretty integral in what the movement known as, which is still around today, the Nation of Islam. Anybody who remembers Nation of Islam from the 1960s being pretty big in the civil rights, the more militant side of the civil rights movement. This was one of the first major, what do they call it, like Black Islam movements in America. Is also it was also used as a Black nationalistic movement as a vehicle for that, specifically led by Elijah Muhammad, So I gotta keep this name right here. Hamas Khalis soon becomes one of the secretaries in charge of Nation of Islam. He works very very close in hand with Elijah Muhammad and his family. During this time, he starts becoming very disillusioned with Elijah Muhammad. Elijah Muhammad is a very controversial figure, even during the early days. Many of the key positions were filled by his family. He started having people refer himself as the Honorable Prophet Elijah, which anybody who has a idea of Islam knows that this is a big no-no. So in Islam, Muhammad, the prophet, is referred to as the last prophet. There are no other there are prophets before him, but there are no prophets after him. So Callus started having a problem with that, and on top of that, his mental health was also starting to play a big factor. He started becoming very erratic. Elijah Muhammad started sidelining him in favor of other people in the movement. Specifically, one of the people that became a rising star at this point when Callus leaves is Malcolm X. Malcolm X was starting to rise to becoming a big central speaking figure and recruiter for Nation of Islam when Callus left. When Callus took his family and he left. So after he left, after promoted, but then he left. He moved to Harlem and started founding his own movement. Caleb, please tell me how to pronounce it again. I'm sorry, everybody.
The Hanafi.
The Hanafi movement.
Before we get to that, you missed an important part of the Nation of Islam. Is this man was the person to convert Kareem Abdul-Jabbar to Islam. So Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, of course, before Islam was Lou Alcindor, was still a huge NBA star in the 70s. If you don't know who Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is, you're living under a rock.
Yeah.
Everything from his regular NBA days to, of course, his most famous with the Harlem Globetrotters. He's been a movie star. He was in what's that movie with Jet Li?
I think I know what you're talking about.
He's like one of the big bosses on one of the levels that Jet Li goes through.
He was in The Last Dragon.
Yes. Great movie.
He was also in the movie Airplane.
Yeah. Yep. So Kareem Abdul-Jabbar would not have been Islamic if it was not for this man. So not only was he involved with Malcolm X, but he was involved with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
And it should be noted that his familiarity with Bruce Lee was not just in the acting realm.
Yeah.
He was a student of Bruce Lee.
Correct. So Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is a black belt in multiple martial arts.
He's been trained by Bruce Lee as well as Chuck Norris.
Yeah. So imagine a 7'2" martial artist coming at you.
Yeah.
I think that's how big he is, but yeah.
Yeah, he's a pretty big guy. Let's all be grateful Kareem Abdul-Jabbar just decided to stick to basketball. But yes, that was it. That Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was a convert and a pupil of Abdul Khalis. In fact, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's career and his money he made from basketball would in part fund the Hanafi movement. A lot of this when they eventually moved to Washington, D.C., and Kareem was, I don't know where he was playing at the time at this point of the 70s. I know he was nearby. I don't know if it was Philadelphia or New York he was playing with, but he was frequently there, and part of his salary he made from the NBA was funding this movement to open this like a school and a movement, and they quickly started in the Washington D.C. area, started getting a lot of converts, and he was
he bought a mansion for Callus.
Oh yeah. No, Kareem
as
was
his headquarters.
Kareem was very much under this man's influence. They were very devoted to him. Now while this is going on, sorry, Abdul Khalis is still trying to become an influential member in the African American Islamic community. He's still trying to surpass Elijah Muhammad and kind of supplant him in the terms of the role for him. Very much so, he's always seen as like a glory hound. That's how very many people in the Nation of Islam saw him as when he was still in good standing. He was trying to kind of wheedle his way into the good graces of Elijah Muhammad by, just being a hanger-on. But when he was eventually forced out, he basically made it his mission to destroy Elijah. He started a letter-writing campaign to many of the Nation of Islam chapters in New York and other places, and basically saying, "No, he's an infidel. He is he's not adhering to the true course of Islam. You should, basically listen to me." Elijah Muhammad also had he had very much a reputation of it's my way or no way. If you don't follow me, if you're not with me, I will destroy you.
Yeah. And at this point, the Nation of Islam, which it still is this way, is very racist. Very. If you are not of Middle Eastern descent, you did not belong in Islam, according to them. So with Khalis being African American, an African American Muslim, and same thing with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, this was a big no-no, and I'm surprised he even made it as far as he did in the NOI.
Yeah, I think he mostly got to that because he was just a follower, hanger, endeared himself to Elijah, and he was able to. He was allowed to be tolerated. Essentially, he wasn't. They didn't. At the end of the day, with Elijah Muhammad, as long as you basically worshipped him, I think there's really, honestly, Nation of Islam under Elijah Muhammad really was more like a cult than anything. All reference and deference was given to Elijah Muhammad. He was called the Prophet Muhammad. Or Prophet Elijah. He never went that far.
Yeah, I know. But he did call himself the only messenger of Allah.
Exactly, I'm shocked that they didn't. I'm shocked he lasted as long as he did.
He had a lot of people under his thumb.
And also, Islam at this point, yes, there has been immigration from the Middle East and other Islamic countries in American history at this point, but they are not enough where where it is today, where we're all interconnected and people just come from all over and they can see this. The Muslim community in America at this point is still kind of isolated outside of certain areas. But when Abdul Khalis is doing this, Elijah Muhammad starts at this point. He is at this point, I'm going to eliminate them. And one of the organizations that he frequently used because most things were never traced back to him, nothing that could ever be proven in court, was the Black Mafia. Aaron, I don't know. Did you ever run into any of these guys when you were in Florida? These guys were all over the place, and they were involved in a lot of interstate drugs and crime.
This was 1970s. I mean, they were around a little bit in the 80s, but he wasn't.
I forgot he.
He wasn't a cop until the late 80s, early 90s.
89, yeah, 89, 90 was when I started.
He was 3 years old at this point, dude. Not even.
Hey, everybody's not even at that point.
No. Well, in '77 was when the siege took place.
Well,
I was
I'm
7
talking
years
about
old.
the Black Mafia.
The
It
Black
was
Mafia
January
'67 was when it was.
January. The start of this is January 12th, 1973.
Yeah, so I'm 3 years old at this point.
You were involved. You knew what was going on.
I
Don't
man, I was following them
He
every
was the
single
Black
day.
Mafia.
I kept a tree going on, but no, like in when I started in Florida in '89, '90, there was some, um, hanging on the tailcoats, basically trying to say that they were, kind of thing. But at that time, it was more the gangbangers for the Bloods and the Crips and Latin Kings. So we didn't have a whole lot, at least where I was. Um, you get over Tampa, St. Petersburg. They were pretty big up there, or over there, I should say.
Yeah, these guys started to fall out mid
Yeah,
'80s.
mid
I
'80s.
I always wondered because every time when I was doing the research for this, started looking up Black Mafia, and I never could find a. Usually, some criminal organizations have an end date like this. This one never seemed to have one, so I was just
No, I
curious.
mean they never had an official end date. They kind of petered out, um, and you would arrest a couple, um, questionable clientele, so to speak, over the years, and they would claim to be, oh well, I'm part of this group and I'm part of that group, and you're like, yeah, okay, whatever. Nothing was really given credence in that regard. So,
Yeah. Well, I bring up the Black Mafia because this is an organization that many of its members are also members of the Nation of Islam and would inevitably carry out some of the more off the books heinous crimes that we knew, everybody in law enforcement knew it was Nation of Islam, Elijah Muhammad taking care of this, but nothing could be proven back to him. They believe, depending on who you ask, they believe that this was carried out, the infamous assassination of Malcolm X. Malcolm X was, at this point when he died, he had broken off from Nation of Islam to form his own organization after he had taken his the journey, the pilgrimage to Mecca, and actually had sat down with actual like Islamic scholars and teachers in the Middle East, and he came back very profoundly changed and nowhere near as radical as he was on religion that he started.
And what people need to understand is the Nation of Islam in the 70s and 80s led to what we have been fighting with now in the Middle East. It started out Nation of Islam where they were a little off the reservation, and then people just went completely radical. If for those, unfortunately, the Islam gets a very bad rap because of people like this, because of terrorists. But for those of us that fought with this and dealt with this, if you actually study Islam at its core, it is a very peaceful religion. It is all about love and acceptance, and not too far off from what Christianity was originally designed as. And with some alterations, of course, but it's all about acceptance and all of that. But just like with everything else, like when the Christian Crusades happened and things like that, you have radicalists that took what they wanted out of these texts, twisted it to benefit themselves, and what they wanted to happen, fed it out into these people that are hurting and broken and have no idea what to do. And I forget his name, but there's a kid I actually went to high school with that became a terrorist and actually drove a tanker into a building and killed a bunch of people. He's from my small little hometown, and he was one of those kids that was just broken and was horrible in school, and nobody liked him. And turns out that he was recruited by a terrorist organization and ended up committing a terrorist act.
And that is how these organizations generally do it. And the Hanafi movement is no different in the sense that they may not have started off radicalized and as militant as Nation of Islam and other subsequent black nationalist organizations were, but they targeted the same. They went after the same people, and unfortunately, in 1970s America, there's plenty of people like that in the African American communities. Now, I mentioned Malcolm X as one of them, but there was another one which that was another horrible massacre, and it's actually called the Hanafi Massacre of 1973. This would actually be one of the driving forces for the siege that we will see that would happen some years later. 1973, several black mafia affiliates, they traveled to Washington D.C. and they carried out it basically was a home invasion because, as Caleb said, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar bought this very expansive house for Abdul Khalis and his family, which they used as their headquarters for their movement. They showed up under the guise of wanting literature and possibly to join this movement. They barreled into the home and killed about 5 members of Abdul Khalis's family, including, I believe, his wife, his children, 5 of his children, and 2 of his 2 people that worked with his movement were all killed in here. The only survivor of this was his daughter, Amina. Now, the police did actually were able to find the individuals. Unfortunately, there was very little evidence. As I said, the only person who survived this was Amina, and Amina had actually suffered a gunshot wound to the head that left her with permanent brain damage to the point where during the trial, now the Abdul Khalis's family had actually begged the prosecution to just take a sworn statement from her so that she didn't have to so she wouldn't have to testify during trial. Unfortunately, I don't think they were aware that a sworn statement like that could be taken and used as evidence in a court. So the prosecutor put her on the stand, and unfortunately, she got about halfway through the testimony when she had an emotional breakdown and just bolted out of the court. And the judge actually had to issue a warrant for her for arrest to bring her back. And eventually, the trial ended in a mistrial. But after that, for years there would be no charges or trial for any of these subsequent gunmen, and this led to the Abdul Khalis to feel that the system had failed him and his family, because despite this, he did actually, believe that, I'm gonna get some justice. Finally they're gonna bring Elijah Muhammad to justice, and that just never happened. So this would lead him down the path that would lead to the siege. This would lead him to have him and his followers enact this fairly well orchestrated attack. So we fast forward to 1977, March 9th, 1977. This is the day when the siege began. Now, the first 3 buildings would be taken over and held and people would be held hostage. The first one was the Ben Benrith International Center. Now, just a quick background for that. That is one of the oldest Jewish charity organizations Excuse me. That is one of the oldest Jewish charity organizations in the United States. These guys were founded back in the 1840s, and ever since then, they've worked to help to enrich and better the Jewish community in the United States. This is where Abdul Khalis and most of his people hostages. They rented a U-Haul van. They more or less just drove right up to the front of the building, and they got out, and they just started grabbing guns, like duffel bags full of guns, crates full of guns and gasoline and ammunition, and they just walked through the lobby of it and subsequently struck one security guard that was on duty in there and took the elevator up to I believe it was the 5th or 6th floor, and started taking hostages and started moving through there. They ended up taking about 134 hostages. This included the staff and visitors that were there for that day. They were able to gain control very, very quickly. Nobody really knew. There were actually some people who were able to get out of the way. I think one person was able to actually escape down the stairwell and get out of the building and start alerting everybody to that something was going on. Now, at the same time that this is happening, across the Islamic Center of Washington, I believe it was the first major Islamic center built in Washington, D.C., if not the United States. I can't remember specifically. 3 members of the Hanafi movement, who were all actually siblings, moved into the Islamic Center just as prayers were, I think it was afternoon prayers had started. They made a beeline right for the office, and they were able to start taking hostages and locking down the office area. They took about 11 people hostage. One of them was actually the head of the center. Now, at this point, the Washington, D.C. police are actually starting to respond. They had first responded to the Benai Center, but then their attention is immediately diverted to the Islamic Center, and then just around the exact same time, in a matter of, like, I believe it was like a window of 10 minutes, the district building, which is this is the city hall essentially of the District of Columbia. This is where the city council meets and everything. Group of the same men of the same movement went up to the 5th floor of the district building where the council offices are, and were able to move in fairly quickly and started taking city councilmen hostage. This one was a little more not. I don't think they put the good people there. This was like, hey, let's see if we can take this well, because people were still able to move. Were still moving in and out of on the hallway just as they're taking hostage. Now, interesting to note, this is also the only place where the two fatalities would occur. The first being a security guard named Mark Cantrell was shot. He didn't die initially. He would die days later due to complications from his wounds there. And Maurice Williams was a 24-year-old reporter for WHUR-FM at Howard University radio station. He was there for a press conference that was supposed to be scheduled that day from the council president. Another interesting person who was he was seriously wounded, but he survived. Marion Barry. This is the future. This was a city councilman. He would actually be the future mayor of Washington, D.C., very also controversial figure, not just because of his policies, but also because he was the mayor that was caught on camera and recording smoking crack cocaine years later, not at this point. Yeah. He was convicted and they still reelected.
It's because of PTSD.
Yeah. He actually he was very lucky to survive. Ricochet shotgun pellet had actually hit him in the chest and had entered just above the heart. So obviously, like, I think it was like a half an inch lower, he's dead. And DC would later have to have a new mayor.
Yeah. That picture that I posted at Picks and Handouts, that's the kid from my hometown. Dad, he lived at Lakes at Sandridge.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I went to school with him. For those that want to look at it, his name was Moner, Moner, Mohammed Abul Salah. He was American. And I went to school with him. He mostly lived in Fort Pierce, but I went to school with him. And the crazy thing about him is everybody knows the 2016 Orlando nightclub shooting.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the most famous shootings. Well, the guy that committed that, Omar Mateen, he and this kid, Abul Salah, were in the same mosque. Omar Mateen told the FBI that the shooting was inspired by the kid I went to school with. So the kid I went to school with was being tracked by the FBI when he left for Syria. And he ended up going to Syria and driving a truck into a building, killing. He ended up killing himself and several Syrian troops, and he was part of the Al-Nusra Front.
Ah, okay.
Yeah,
that's
so
that's part of ISIS, if anyone isn't aware.
He was the first known American suicide bomber to die in Syria.
Well, and he got famous somehow.
People can go watch his video. There's actually a video of him out there. But yeah, he even has his own wiki page and everything. So my small little hometown in Florida produced a suicide bomber.
Yeah. On average for Florida.
Yeah.
Well, as this is going on, all three incidences, as this is all going on, I say the district building was the one that was the one that didn't initially succeed, because this is the one where the police were initially on hand, being City Hall and everything. The hostage takers actually got into a brief gunfight with Washington D.C.'s Special Operations Division, SOD. Now, at this point, there's not a SWAT team in the strictest traditional sense as we know it. SWAT teams, at this point, an American policing thing is still being formed. Each city has their own kind of idea of how this should be. Washington D.C. kind of took the measured approach, like New York City did, where they just they used it when they had to. But a lot of times DC was very big on hostage negotiating, as we will see, as we're about to see. So at this point, DC is starting to become to a standstill now, because where these are located are on Belmont Avenue, Massachusetts Avenue, and I forget, I don't believe it. I remember seeing where the City Hall was located. But it's on Pennsylvania Avenue. Actually, it's actually not that far from the White House. Actually, that was probably initially what was starting to grab the headlines. Is basically there's a shooting right down the road from the White House. So as this is happening, DC is coming to a standstill. These roads are being blocked off. Buildings are being evacuated. Around all the buildings. The Holiday Inn, which was the biggest hotels in this area that was outside of the B'nai B'nai, the Jewish Center, has been evacuated. So people are displaced. This is where the idea of the siege starts coming in place, because with just these three buildings Washington, for the most part, was brought to a standstill. Nobody could move. Now, as this is going on, the Abdul Khalis is initially starts shouting to the initial officers. He wants to talk. He starts making demands of what he'll do so he'll let the hostages go. If not, he'll start. He said, quote, he would start, throwing heads out there for everybody to see. He demanded that the killers of his family would be brought to justice. He demanded Elijah Muhammad, and interestingly enough, also he demanded Muhammad Ali be delivered to him. Muhammad Ali at this point is actually the one big spokesman for Nation of Islam at this point. So, and then very bizarre, he also demanded that and this was the more immediate one because it was about to be premiering that I believe that day. The motion picture Muhammad, Messenger of God, was supposed to be premiering that day, or at least within on that day or the next day at select theaters in New York City. This was a epic motion picture, interestingly enough, made by and produced by a Muslim, a man from Lebanon, about the Muhammad. But as also another fact about Islam is that images of the Prophet are prohibited. If you ever look at photos, there are no photos, there are no paintings or murals or any kind of the Prophet Muhammad, and to do so is considered blasphemous. So you can see why, even for years, this film was very controversial, and many influential imams and Islamic scholars get it shut down to no avail. But this was one of the immediate demands of the hostage takers, was that this film would be, not allowed to play in theaters. Very bizarre, and initial response of the police was actually was pretty decent at the time, considering the coordinated effort at trying to combat this. Now, initially, the Justice Department under Douglas Heck and Rudy Giuliani they organized a team within the Justice Department at combating terrorism, but they did allow the DC police to actually handle this. There were individuals from the FBI and other intelligence organizations sent representatives to try and help out in the situation. Luckily enough, nobody ever tried to take this away from the DC police, and they were allowed to handle the negotiation. Now, what the police eventually settled on was just basically waiting these guys out. They figured that they were eventually, if they played a lot of stalling tactics with the hostage takers, they would be able to bring about a peaceful resolution. Khalis started becoming very erratic while in there. Many of the hostage takers said that initially, when he gave a very long-winded speech about Islam and how he hated Yadi, which is the Muslim Islamic term for Jew, and started brandishing a sword in there. Many of the hostage takers had machetes and other such things. So this was a very tense situation, but they were able to more or less wait them out. Now, there was no initial demand as we would see like years later in other hostage situations, for like to storm the building. The problem, the police worry that if they had tried that, it would result in the death of many people. And of course, they don't have an idea of what is going on in here. So they had no, I guess, no eyes and ears in there. As this would go on, they were able to bring in actually ambassadors from the Pakistan, Egypt, and I believe, what was the other country? There was Iran. Were able to bring in their ambassadors, and now they would also play a very pivotal role in there because they were able, obviously being fellow Muslims and being educated, many of them were able to talk to Khalis Abdul, and were able to kind of essentially talk him down. They were able to talk him down and able to kind of calm him down and get him to start like releasing hostages. There were some hostages who were wounded in the initial taking of the buildings were released. The FBI also were able to bring in some of the first ever profilers to build a psychological profile on Abdul Khalis and kind of find the motives and use that in the negotiation with him. It really played out as very bizarre. It did kind of, at the time, it did grab the attention of everybody, but it also at the same time didn't really garner like international attention like I think he was hoping for. Eventually, once he was able to be talked down and the hostages were released, and actually initially the hostage takers were going to be released on their own. I believe they were arrested and then they were arraigned on very low bail. Now, after this, they were able to, during the trial, they would eventually they would be convicted. Elijah Muhammad, Abdul Khalis was sentenced to 21 to 120 years in prison, and he would die in prison.
Yeah, he died in May 25th, 2003 in the prison hospital. His death is described as being due to natural causes, but who knows?
Yeah. I mean, he
wasn't that old.
No, he wasn't. He probably
natural causes, quote unquote.
I mean, many people who had crossed the Nation of Islam or these other kind of black nationalist movements and met untimely ends in prison. In fact, I believe one of the people who was the assailant in Abdul Khalis's family's killing would be killed in prison as well. I always found when I was researching the police response, the DC response, both unusual for its time, and also it seemed like they were kind of trying to feel around for it, because one of the things that happened initially, like even an hour after the thing, Abdul Khalis was able to call the Islamic Center, and he was coordinating with his other associates in the other buildings. And why the heck were they not? The way I understand it, and again, Aaron and Caleb, please correct me because I've never had any training on this, but in a hostage situation, are you supposed to like isolate these guys so that they can't communicate?
So, yes, but we have to not only keep in mind the times. This is the 70s. Again, a lot of the stuff is brand new. And on top of that, this is the first American terrorist attack, major terrorist attack. You're having simultaneous targets being hit. You're having 3 separate targets within the same area. I mean, so DC, for those that don't know, you have the regular DC police, but then you also have the Capitol Police. Capitol Police are one of the oldest law enforcements. They were founded, I believe it was 1828, when they moved everybody to DC, from Philly to DC. But so Capitol Police has been around a long time, but none of them ever had to deal with terrorists. Nobody was stupid enough to threaten America and do all of this stuff. And even after this, the Capitol Police, I know Ben and I both were going to go Capitol Police at one point. And the Capitol Police didn't really change any of their tactics until the 90s, when there was a second terrorist attack in 1997. That's when they started really changing all their tactics, and that's when we're seeing SWAT teams and this and that come out, which Capitol Police SWAT team is some of the best in the world. Those guys they train with the FBI and all of that, and if you make FBI SWAT, you're the best of the best.
Oh yeah, there is no
like LAPD SWAT's really good, but FBI SWAT's the best of the best. But yeah, so this is so early on, and again, we're not used to terrorist attacks, so this is just so new that I don't think they knew how to handle it. And the standard practice now, when there is a hostage situation, and to be honest, this is called a terrorist attack, but I don't know if you can consider it that. It's more of a hostage situation that just happens to be religiously motivated.
Well, yeah,
but they now, yes, you cut off communications. You do a number of things, depending on where they are. You would cut off communications so that it's only you communicating with them. You try and do numerous things depending on where you are. You try to sweat them out if you can. Cut off the power so the AC stops working. Make them uncomfortable so they want to get out or they can't think clearly. You want to get a burner phone in there to try and communicate with them and try to establish a rapport with them and things like that. Here, with them just sitting there sweating it out, goods and bads. Yes, they didn't rush the place, which means less risk for hostages to be killed. But then you also mess with, oh, hey, they're not going to negotiate. We just might as well kill these people now.
Which was a fear of the police from this situation, which is why the ambassadors, when Abdul Khalis had asked for ambassadors to kind of to speak with, they acquiesced to that demand, and it actually would play a pivotal part in talking him down, where he was able to talk with Islamic equals, I guess. So I think this does one thing that what a lot of people don't know about the early stages, I guess, and this is probably one of the earliest stages of Islamic. Excuse me. No, I didn't want to cough in the mic. One of the earliest terrorist acts of Islamic terrorist attacks, hijackings and kidnappings. Munich in 1977. Yeah, Munich, the Munich Olympics, where the PLO Black Hand took hostages of the Israeli athletes in Munich. Initially, they were taken hostage. They were killed when the Germans launched a failed hostage rescue, and they, as you said, Caleb, the terrorists felt their backs were to the wall, so they killed they killed the hostages. Many of them were started off as that. So,
Right.
But you are right. This it really did, I really felt the main motivation was the fact that Abdul Khalis, his family was massacred, and he didn't get the justice that he thought he should have.
Well, and to bring up that whole hijacking, while we were talking about this, that was going through my head. This incident that we're talking about happened in 1977. That Israeli hijacking happened in 1976. Okay, so we have a year prior. We have a response of, we're going to storm this aircraft. We know what we're doing. We're going to go in here. We're going to do this. And it becomes a shit show, a total shit show. Number one, because they didn't have the training that they have now. Now you have a military group, Delta, which that's all they do. They train day in and day out for aircraft hostage rescue. That's what they do. And I can talk about it now because, years have passed, but I had the opportunity to design some munitions and weapons for that response team. For that sole purpose. Yeah, it was actually very, very cool.
Without stating the name, my former uncle, my aunt's ex-husband, the father of my cousins, he is the vice president of a certain gun company that has a contract with the military. It is one of the largest gun companies in the world. And they, before my dad joined law enforcement, he worked for that company. And that company designed many, many, many things, and still do to this day. They've actually been on, what was that show? Future Weapons.
Oh, back in the day. I love that show.
So they were on that. When we're off the air, I'll tell you what company, but they were on the show Future Weapons. I've know that facility like the back of my hand. But yeah, that company played a very pivotal part in stopping things like this.
Correct. And it also it should also be noted during this siege, what the heck were they called? One of the precursors to the Delta Force was actually at this location. I am
right. So, and I said that to say this. I think that there was so close of a proximity of these incidences happening that in the back of their mind, they're going, what if? What if this becomes another standoff? What if we storm one of these buildings or all three of these buildings, number one, without the government stepping in and bringing in military elitists, because that's what it's going to take. We don't have the manpower or the capability or the training to simultaneously storm all three buildings. I mean, and let's be real, that's something that
we still struggle with.
Yeah,
we do. And I was just going to say, that's something that the Navy SEALs hate to do.
Yeah.
Simultaneous infiltration of buildings.
And it's
havoc.
It's a tactical nightmare.
It is.
I mean, just simultaneously entering the same building is a tactical nightmare.
It's a nightmare. Now you're talking about three different buildings?
Three different buildings.
Spread out over
three different layouts.
Correct.
Then you have to worry about, what if my comms get jammed? What if this and that? And if we don't hit at the same time, these people can call out to the other ones and say, hey, they're coming.
Right.
and then
Exactly.
And you're worried
it's
about
death.
You're worried about, I have 3 different teams that at that point in time in the early 70s would have been from 3 different agencies, 3 different entities, whether they were civilian, quote unquote, or military. They would have been separate. You probably would have utilized Delta, maybe the SEALs, and FBI. The Marshals were still coming into their own. The Marshals now have one of the top response teams in the nation. They can be anywhere within the United States in under 15 minutes. That's ridiculous.
By the way,
that's now
blue light.
Yeah, I was just about to say
blue light counterterrorism unit was a precursor to Delta Force,
and these guys were there.
Yeah,
right. So you have blue light there, okay, and I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall for this. My personal opinion is that they're going to the higher up saying, hey, remember what happened in Israel? Remember what happened with that airline? Do you want this? Do you want this press? Do you want these heads on your shoulders in the United States? This is a clusterfuck. We don't want to do this. We need to resolve it the best that we can. Let's give him what we can, like the $750. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, another thing that was another demand that I was, again, one of the more bizarre ones. And keep in mind, this man literally was like, get rid of this movie.
But it's principle to this guy. You gotta understand this. This guy feels like he's been wronged, and one of those wrongings was you guys took this money from me.
Yeah. Right. So I'm sure that they went, okay, you know what? We'll give you the $750. We don't care.
But let's bring a celebrity.
Some other things that we can do?
Muhammad Ali. We're definitely not fucking doing that. We're not bringing the greatest boxer to ever live.
Right.
And to a terrorist.
All of this going on a short time after the Israeli incident. I can't help but feel that was an integral part of the decision on why they didn't try a forceful infiltration, you know?
Oh yeah, I mean, imagine if they had tried to force. Yeah, imagine if they tried to force their way into the district building. It goes wrong. They already proved. We already lost one guy.
Without a doubt. I mean,
the city councilman literally almost died. What if they had killed the whole city council? The political fallout of just losing an entire city's legislative body would have probably. God.
And look at how much bad press that whole debacle received in 76. I mean, it was on the news for months, and you know, that whole incident was one of the reasons why Israel changed what they do in their responses, and it had a domino effect to several other government response groups within that community. Hey, this doesn't work. We need to do this. And that led me to the whole thing that I did with Delta. And because during that time, from 70s up through the 90s, that was a prominent fear. And it happened more than people realized. And it was, we need a way to do this. This is the way we handle this. This is the way we enter this. We enter it fast and hard. We do A, B, C, D. We need something that can handle these parameters, but not go over here to this area. So,
I mean, honestly,
you had all this going on.
I mean, in my opinion, I think the DC Metropolitan Police Department did a damn good handling of this thing. All being considered that this, again, like you said, this is a time when these counter-terrorist measures are still being developed. Everything everything is disjointed. You have one agency putting money into it. You have one agency that doesn't even have any kind of plans drawn out. You've got the LAPD, the guys who technically made the first SWAT team, operating under the policy of shoot first and then maybe shoot some more people. I don't know.
So
and then you got the, so this is actually pretty well done.
Well,
like I said,
and we had this happen in early 77, and then what's funny is, and I don't think coincidental at all, is November of 1977 is when Delta Force is created.
Exactly.
And then just so everybody knows, Delta Force was created in November of 77. Colonel Charles Beckwith, one of the greatest Delta Force colonels in history. He's the man that created the Delta Force. We would not have it without him. He actually was in the UK and was with the British SAS.
Right.
Which are, I mean, SAS are some of the best in the world.
They are the SAS are literally wrote.
Yeah.
They wrote the book on counterterrorism.
Yeah. Everything that is structured in Delta Force is structured after the SAS.
And they still didn't teach him everything.
Yeah.
They literally like, okay, bye. He's like, I'm
well,
not done.
and there's a reason that Delta Force and SAS work hand in hand with each other. I know a couple guys that were Delta Force, and they deploy with SAS constantly because of the structure of them. They mesh so well together that these guys can never meet each other and move like they've known each other for a decade.
I had an old acquaintance years ago. I believe SAS. He always for a logistics corps, but for a truck driver, he seemed to know an awful lot. More than that I felt was like the typical dude on the internet just looks up.
But that's what makes them so good is they're able to integrate themselves into any situation, any environment, and maintain their cool and yet still be effective at what they do. And at that, at the time of this in 77, that was non-existent.
Oh no, it was still coming up. And in an upcoming episode, we're going to cover one of the more successful hostage rescues of this. Something that I love reading about. Operation Thunderbolt, the Israeli raid on Entebbe Airport. We will be covering that. That is part of our terrorist.
Yeah. We're doing a whole line right now of terrorists and things like that. Also a lot of fuck ups that we did not learn from, such as Waco.
Yep.
Oh God, yeah.
Waco is one that we are going to touch on.
Ruby Ridge.
Yep.
Ruby Ridge, yeah.
Those will kind of go hand in hand. We'll probably do one after the other because they are long enough to be their own thing. So we'll go one after the other because they do play with each other.
Oh, without a doubt. You would not have Waco if it was not for Ruby.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we are going to be doing which I didn't realize that we have a mutual friend in our company who his brother was Delta Force, by the way.
I'm gonna have to get with you about who that is. Yeah. I think I know who it is, but
OPSEC. We don't want to say the name, but yes, I just sent him a message because I thought I remembered him saying that. But yeah, so
final thoughts, everybody, on this situation.
Man, hats off to DC Police. Hats off. I think they. For the time frame, this era in law enforcement was they're babies. They're still babies. Let's be real. Training is still being developed. Techniques are still being developed, and if you look at what they were learning then, compare it to what I learned, compare it to what you guys learned. it's archaic, to say the least, compared then to now. But for what they knew, given that time period, I think they handled it tremendously. I think it could have been a very, very different outcome, and I think it could have been very detrimental and could have been a black mark in American history, had they made some different decisions. So kudos, man. I don't necessarily like personally the ones that were involved in the decisions for future decisions that they make, but in this particular incident, I think they were on their game. They exuded some wisdom and said, hey, we need to take a step back here. Let's not be quick to pull the trigger, literally and metaphorically. And it just was well done all the way around.
Yeah. Caleb?
I agree. I think for the time, obviously we would do stuff a little differently now. But for the time and the training that they had, I think it was handled well. For all of those places to be taken, especially the first building, which, I mean, they ended up in that first building, they ended up taking 134 hostages. And then
it was
11
insane.
in the second building, and then X amount in the third, for only 3 people or 2 people to have been killed and 1 to have been injured. That says a lot.
Yeah, and really, the second person, the security guard, he would die days later. He died directly of the situation, but it wasn't right away. The only one who died away was Maurice Williams.
Yeah, there was definitely the opportunity for mass casualty, and it did not happen. So kudos to you guys. If any of you are still alive and are listening to this, we would love to talk to you.
Absolutely.
If any of you were involved in this, OPSECs, if you have to be anonymous, please let us know. But yeah, I think for what they did and what they could do, they made the best of a bad situation.
Yeah, I personally don't. One thing that of all with all the agencies working together, at least I was just shocked that, and I think part of the reason, because this was under the Carter administration, the feds just didn't step in and be like, yeah, we're taking this over. Because I mean, let's be honest, in the middle of DC, 3 buildings, one of them a literal stone's throw away from the White House. If this had happened under Reagan, what do you think the Gipper, or whatever the hell they call him, would have done? He probably would have ordered the FBI and Delta right in and just blast everybody. Carter basically told them, let the DC police handle it. And that's exactly what they did. Had all the resources right there for them to, but they kept it a police matter, and that was it. But so that concludes tonight, folks. Seeds of Washington, one of the lesser known and almost forgotten but very pivotal aspects in American criminal history. Please stay with us for next week, where we continue our series on terrorist attacks, both internationally and domestically.
Yeah.
I am Ben.
Hi, Ben.
Hey, Ben.
Hi. I'd say I'm Ben, and then you're supposed to say I'm Caleb. I'm Aaron.
Oh, my bad. I'm Aaron.
Hi. But no,
this is like an awkward AA meeting.
It is.
Right.
No, next week we'll probably get into maybe Timothy McVeigh, I'm thinking.
Yeah.
I hate to say I love that story, but I do. It's
an interesting story.
It's a very interesting story, very interesting background, very iffy with military, but yeah. So we'll probably get into Timothy McVeigh, because that does kind of snowball into quite a few other things, because he had his hand in quite a few things.
Right, and in regards to Timothy McVeigh, there will I'm sure that will come up is a few. Why? Why did it happen this way at this time with this particular building?
Yeah.
That's all we're going to say on that. You'll have to tune in and
Yes.
find out exactly why.
So, with that, I would like to thank you for visiting Scarlet Tavern. Remember to turn in your glasses, push in your seats, and as always, tip the bard. Good night, everybody.
Good
Good
night.
night.